This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we'll show you how to go from employee truck driver to savvy business owner. And we'll do it together because we're starting our own trucking company, Haulin Assets, so you'll get a front row seat through the whole process. Together with some experts in the field, we'll teach you how to set up a business, buy a truck, get your DOT and MC numbers, get insurance, and a lot more. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast. I am Craig. Chris, welcome back.
Good to be here.
And today we are talking, for episode 15, we're talking about DOT regs, drug and alcohol compliance. I spoke too soon in the last episode when I said this is something I was excited to talk about.
Why are you so excited about drugs, Craig?
Anyway,
that's never happened before.
Okay, so that is what we're going to be getting to, but I do want to briefly peel the curtain back once more and say that this is an episode that we're recording. This is an episode that we are recording well ahead of schedule because you've got something big coming up.
Yeah, I do. I think I mentioned in the past that I'm in the Army National Guard, and I have my 2-week annual training coming up. So yeah, we've had to record a couple episodes kind of back to back, and I'm going to be off the road and off the grid for a couple of weeks.
So what do you do in those trainings? Like, what's your role?
Right now I am a battalion executive officer. Sounds fancy, but not really.
Sounds incredibly fancy.
Yeah. So I am kind of I guess the best way to put it would be something like a chief operating officer for battalion.
Okay.
I try to make things easier for the boss.
Keep everything organized for the guy who has to make the decisions?
Yep.
Okay. Well, that sounds like my nightmare.
Yeah, it's not my most favorite job in the military, that's for sure. not what I think I'm best at.
And so because of this, and you're going to be out for a little while, and we're recording this in advance, we're not able to declare who the winner of the last contest was, unfortunately, but I'm sure that you know what's coming up after people will have listened to this episode, right? Yeah,
so I can't really say who the winner of the contest is, but I can tell you what the next contest is going to be. So when this podcast actually launches, the thing that you're going to have to do is, like the rest of the contest, go to the Haulin Assets Facebook page, and all you need to do is post what you're hauling, and a picture would be great. So you flatbedders out there that haul some really crazy things, they should have some good pictures.
I love driving down the road and seeing like the giant windmill propellers.
Yeah.
Those are cool.
It is crazy how many of those you see. I was just thinking about that the other day. I literally, when I'm driving, like especially on I-80, my last trip coming out of Portland, and they must ship them up there, and they come in because literally, I bet every hour I'm passing one of those going in the opposite direction, at least one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Those are long.
Well, let me ask you this as well, because it's not just about the contest winners. I'm sure that our listeners care mostly about that, but this also is going to affect your month.
Yeah,
your bottom line, because you can't be out on the road.
Absolutely, it's going to affect August. I mean, I'm really only going to be able to run for about half of the month, and so it's going to make a tight month, which will be good and interesting. I think there will be a lot of things that you can apply it to. I mean, what happens if a guy, if your engine blows and you have to replace the engine and you're sat down for 2 weeks, how does that affect the profitability?
Or what happens if you want to take a dang vacation every once in a while?
Yeah, a big, long 2-week vacation, how does that affect things? And so, we'll be able to see that. I'm not going to change the financials in any way. We're just going to see what happens.
Chris, do you ever take vacations?
I do some, yeah. I try to.
Okay, I like the hesitancy in your voice on that. So I'm going to take that as a no.
No, I do. Especially the last few years, I've been taking them a little bit more. But when I first started, when my dad and I bought our first business, Progressive Reporting Agency, I probably didn't take much of a vacation for several years. But
right.
That's kind of the nice thing about a business is as you grow it and you get a little bit better, you should, if you do it right. Trucking is the same way. You should be able to make it so that you can take a vacation.
Well, before we get started talking about drugs, anything else that of interest with this Army thing? I guess I'm just kind of curious, not even from a business perspective, but so, what are you going to end up doing for a couple of weeks? Or where are you going to go?
So the annual training this year is here close in Camp Williams, which is the kind of the main training post for the Utah Army National Guard, then also out at Dugway. We're going to kind of have our units spread all over the place and just doing kind of a war exercise scenario type thing and practice running a battalion.
One more thing before our subject. Anything interesting out on the road these days?
Interesting to me. So one of the, actually, let me take a step back. So back to my military days when I'm an engineer in the military. So a lot of my training has been at Fort Leonard Wood, which is where most of the engineer type things happen. And so when I was back there, Missouri, especially around the Lake of the Ozarks area where I was, has a lot of really big caverns and caves. And some of them are just huge. And like they take you tours in them on Jeeps and vehicles. And so this last load that I was delivering, I delivered actually to an underground cold storage facility in Missouri where they actually, you go up there, you drop your trailer, and they take the trailer inside of the mountain, unload it, and then bring it back out to you.
This sounds very like Dr. Evil kind of, my underground
Maybe I was hauling
lair.
something I didn't know what I was really hauling. They said it was frozen pineapples, but
who
knows?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, should we talk about drugs?
Let's talk about drugs.
Let's talk about drugs. Oh, okay. We just got flagged by the FBI. I heard it happen in real time. Okay, so tell me a little bit about what we're talking about today. Let's set this up for me, Chris.
We are going to talk about drugs, and we're going to talk about compliance things. And so we brought another expert in today. We've got Mercedes in our office, almost been with us for 8 years, and she is a compliance guru, a genius, just a sponge. Is one of those kind of people that can read through a regulation that you or I would read through and be like, that makes my brain hurt. And she'll just absorb all the information and be able to, talk about it in a manner that the rest of us can understand.
Well, we're going to put that to the test. Welcome, Mercedes.
Thank you.
So again, let's set the scene here. What sort of questions are we going to be asking of Mercedes today?
So what we're really going to kind of try to focus in on, what are those last minute things that you've got to do to be in compliance with the DOT regulations before you hit the road, that compliance type stuff. Some of the compliance things can happen after you get on the road, but there are some of them that have to happen before you actually even start rolling. And that's what we're really going to focus on.
Okay. So one last time, let's talk about drugs.
So don't do them. That's it, right? We've said all we need to say about drugs. Don't do them. We can move on.
Thanks for listening to the Haulin Assets podcast. This has been fantastic. What a great episode, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, why?
If it were only that easy.
Okay, so, all right. Go on, Chris. Talk about drugs.
All right, so we've got Mercedes here, going to talk about drugs and then alcohol requirements. That's kind of the step one on the compliance thing. So, first and foremost, Mercedes, what do you really need to do to follow the DOT's drug and alcohol requirements?
The first thing you want to have in place is a written drug and alcohol policy that each of your drivers has read and signed. Each of your CDL drivers. It's not required for non-CDL drivers.
Okay.
So that kind of sounds like long and complicated. Is it?
No, there are 12 requirements written in the regulations that need to be in the policy, and it's usually only a few pages long.
All right. So like you take, for example, when one of our clients signs up for our drug and alcohol program, they get they get that drug and alcohol policies kind of all included with it. So it makes it simple. So as complicated as some of this compliance stuff is, we can make it pretty easy. If you had to go out and create your own drug and alcohol policy and write it all up and do all that kind of stuff, it would make your brain hurt. But for a pretty reasonable price, whether it's through us or somebody else, you can get all those kind of things taken care of.
Right. It'd be expensive to go to a lawyer and have them help you draft that on your own, right?
Yeah.
Personalized.
You'd probably exceed what we charge in less than an hour working with an attorney to do it.
Yeah.
So Mercedes, besides a drug and alcohol policy, what else do they need?
You want to make sure that each driver has taken a pre-employment drug test and that you have the negative results on file before you dispatch them for the first time.
Okay, so what if they, let's say they went and applied to work at another motor carrier and decided not to work for them and can show you that guy's negative test result. Will that work?
Unfortunately, no. You want it to be in your own company name.
Why is that? Is that just a legal requirement?
Yep, it's just to show that your company is compliant. It's linked to your company, your DOT number.
You're covering your own ass,
Yeah,
not
exactly.
not that guy.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Not necessarily. Both asses.
Yes, that's important. So, once you get those results back and they come back clean, what happens at that point?
So your drivers will be entered into a random DOT testing program. It's also called a consortium. And it's basically a pool of drivers that get randomly selected for drug and alcohol tests. And
how many, I know this is kind of a little bit of a hot topic, but what percentage of drivers have to get tested in that pool?
Currently, the rate is 25% for drugs and 10% for alcohol per year. That can change. The FMCSA actually sends out questionnaires to companies, random companies every year, and they kind of collect the numbers on how many positive tests there were and how many negative tests they were to determine whether that percentage, that 25 and 10%, is still good for them to use or if they need to up it. So it's been at that rate for the past few years now, 3 or 4 years.
Okay. So it can change, but currently it's at 25 and 10. So let's talk a little bit about, I know there's some kind of requirement where you have to get, if they've been a CDL driver for somebody else in the past, like in a certain number of years, you have to get some information from their previous employer too, right?
Yes. Yeah, if your driver has had any other DOT regulated job within the past 3 years, you want to send an inquiry to their previous employer, asking them about their safety performance history, whether they ever failed a drug or an alcohol test, and if so, did they complete the required follow-ups.
So I hate this kind of thing where you have to send something out. You're required to meet this government regulation, but you're relying on somebody else, another company to provide you that information. So, what happens if you've requested that information and they don't get it to you? Are you in trouble?
No, you just have to have 3 documented attempts to show good faith effort on your part. It's not your fault if you don't get a response, as long as you have those 3 documented attempts. But one thing that's going to help or help this problem in general is that the FMCSA is coming out with a clearinghouse that will be effective in January, where people will actually be able to log in and run inquiries on their prospective drivers to see if they've had any positives or anything like that reported to the FMCSA. This is going to be a brand new program.
So will they be able to make an inquiry into that clearinghouse instead of contacting the previous employer? It kind of takes that requirement away.
That's the idea, yeah, but it's going to take the 3 years for it to catch up, because anything that happened before the implementation of the clearinghouse doesn't need to be reported to it. So if you're hiring a driver in January, you're still going to need to do the normal paper inquiries, because there's not going to be anything in the clearinghouse to see.
So let's go back to the paper inquiries. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you have to have 3 documented attempts. Does that mean you try to call them on the phone and then say, hey, I wasn't able to get a hold of them, or what constitutes a attempt?
Yeah, a phone call is okay. It's better to have something in writing. I always recommend sending an email and printing off a copy of the email, or if you send a fax, make sure you get the fax confirmation. A phone call is okay if you're really diligent in making notes, dates and times of when you tried to call, but it's better to have something in writing.
Okay, good. Again, this kind of seems like, obviously it's a little bit of work and it's somewhat complicated, but, Tyler and I talked about in, I think it was episode 3, when we were talking about getting your motor carrier authority, we talked a little bit about Motor Carrier HQ's audit assistance package. And that package provides the forms that you need to send out, kind of what exactly you need to ask for and how to do it. So it kind of makes that process pretty simple, right?
Yes.
Let me jump in if I could and ask this question. So you guys are talking about when you hire an employee, the employee has to have this documentation that you can submit to the DOT. But, we're talking about starting your own company. And, if I'm an owner-operator with a single truck, I don't have any employees, so how does this apply to me in that case?
You treat yourself as if you're your own employee. Basically, you drug test yourself. You do an inquiry for yourself as if you were a hired driver.
Okay, so you can go through kind of the same process that you would otherwise.
Yep, exactly.
It doesn't really change anything, right? You still have to go and request that information from your previous employer and show that you've got it. And yeah, kind of crazy.
Yeah, so not a lot of people are going to be in your situation, right, Chris, where most guys who are doing the owner-operator thing are going to have that history.
Yeah, so they're going to have to reach out and figure it out.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, very good.
So another thing that's kind of important to keep with that when you're talking about, people's previous employment history, potential drug history, things like that, you're getting their medical card, health information, all that stuff's kind of confidential information, right, Mercedes? There's some requirements tied to that, correct?
Yes, definitely. It's written in the regulations. It needs to be kept in a secure location where only authorized people who need it can access it.
So locked filing cabinet in the boss's office?
Yes, definitely.
That could be
Don't
good
just
enough.
leave it laying out anywhere.
Gotcha.
Okay, good. Well, is there anything else that people really need to consider when it comes to drug and alcohol?
One thing I think is really important right now, that's a big issue, is medical marijuana and state initiatives to legalize marijuana. It is still federally not allowed, and it's really confusing and misleading to drivers because they think if they have a prescription for it or something that it's okay, but it will still be reported as a positive on a DOT test, and it will get you in trouble in an audit. And so you want to be really careful of that it's still federally not allowed.
So just because I travel to Colorado and I want to smoke a doobie, and
Did you just use the word doobie?
I did, yeah.
What year were you born, Chris?
About the same time as
the Doobie Brothers?
That or Tommy Boy came out when I was living in my van down by the river.
I couldn't let that go. All right, I've said my piece.
And even another thing to go along with that is even CBD oil. A lot of people are using that, but it's not guaranteed to not have any THC in it. So you can still test positive just with CBD oil, and it's really iffy. You want to really be careful.
So I think the point is that if you're going to have a CDL, you just basically have to stay away from that stuff. You
Exactly.
gotta, it doesn't matter if you're in Colorado and it's legal in Colorado, it's not legally federally, and these are all federal regulations, and you just plain can't do it.
Right. Well, that's depressing for some people, I'm sure.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the other compliance things that need to happen before hitting the road. What's something else?
You definitely want to have a driver qualification file built for yourself or your drivers. Some things that go along with that are having an application for employment, a copy of your CDL, and your medical certificate.
Okay, driver qualification files they're pretty involved. That's probably the thickest piece of our audit assurance package is putting that driver qualification file together, and it's something that needs to be done before you actually hit the road. We could probably spend an entire episode on driver qualification files, and maybe at some point we will, but that's just kind of the basics. They need to have it. It's going to have an employment application. That audit assistance package has all that paperwork with it so that you can kind of gather it in a relatively easy manner, right?
Yep. It's all listed on the outside of the folders, each item that you need in there.
Okay. All right. So is there any other kind of big compliance item that absolutely has to happen before a company starts operations?
From this point, I mean, you still have some time to get your audit files completely built. You should have a good chunk of them done. You want to keep your paperwork organized from the beginning, definitely. But I have made a list of all the paperwork and safety or emergency equipment that drivers want to carry in the cab with them the first time they head out on the road. And then also a list of what decals you need to make sure you have on the truck to not get in trouble.
Okay, awesome. That's going to be a huge resource. So we'll post that either in the show notes or on Motor Carrier HQ's website. We'll have all that list of information that they need to have. Make sure before you hit the road, you look over that and you can check all the boxes.
Yeah, and even if it is on that other website, they can still go to the show notes. I'm sure we'll link to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Either way, you can check that out. HaulinAssetsLLC.com.
Okay, well, I think that's kind of all I've got. Anything else, Mercedes, before we wrap it up?
I think that covers it.
Okay, what about you, Craig? Do you have anything about drugs that you feel like you need to add?
I have things I need to get off my chest or out of my chest.
Is this the confessional? Do we need to go get a priest?
Let's just say it's a good thing I'm not out on the road right now, Chris.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
That was a joke.
Do I need to go? I feel like I need to go dime you out to the police. They're just down the road.
That's true. I do live very close to the police. So let me see what I've absorbed. We joked a lot and we talked a lot about the drug testing and having that documentation in hand. But then you also talked about the driver qualification report. Were there any other
driver qualification file?
The file.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm getting there.
Close.
It's
You haven't messed up with gas.
I was just going to say, at least I didn't call it the driver qualification gas. Okay, so we've got those. What was the other big one? I feel like there was one other one that we talked about. Was it MVR? Did we talk about that?
We may have mentioned that. That's one of the things that needs to be in the,
all right.
driver qualification file.
Okay, maybe that just stuck in my head from a previous conversation. I don't know. Anyway, okay, so we've got all this stuff, and it's got to be ready to go once again, kind of before we are able to hit the road, much like our last episode, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, very good. Well, I think we've set a new land speed record for the Haulin Assets podcast, Chris. This may be our shortest one to date, but hey, that's cool.
That's good. You got to have some of them shorter than others.
Yeah, this one isn't so complicated. It's just hey kids, don't do drugs and pass that test so you can get out there on the road.
Yeah, it is a short one, but it's actually a really important, critical one. Especially that drug and alcohol piece. A lot of the time, that's one of the things that guys just neglect. They don't do, and the last thing you want to have happen when you show up when your DOT auditor shows up for that initial entrant audit that you're going to have sometime in that first year, the last thing you want to do is not have a drug and alcohol policies, because it's one of the quickest things that's going to get you shut down. If you're not doing the pre-employment drug test and you don't have your drivers in a pool and things like that, that's going to be a big red mark on your audit.
Right. And as always, people can go get more details about this. Check out the full show notes at Haulin Assets LLC. We'll have resources there. If they are elsewhere, we'll link to those so that you can get all the information you need on this kind of compliance issue that we're talking about today. So make sure you visit HaulinAssetsLLC.com. Also, check out the Facebook page. Make sure you're following us there.
Yeah, that's where the contest stuff is. That's the important piece.
That's the fun part. Well, good. So, Chris, I think we're good to cut and run then. And what are we doing next time? Do we know the topic when you get back from your training?
I'm 90% sure we're going to talk about ELDs, which actually should be the last thing that we really talk about before we actually start getting into operations. So after that, sometime in the very near future after that, we'll actually start going into some of the money, what's happened money-wise in the first really 3 months of operations.
That'll be really interesting.
That should be good.
I'm looking forward to that. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Mercedes, thank you for joining us and for your wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Have a good week.